There are trillion-dollar industries built on answering one single question. What is the future? Before Apple, Google, or more recently, companies like Airbnb or Stripe became massive enterprises, they were just small groups of people with a vision and the will to execute it. This podcast focuses on that stage, the early stage. We seek out founders with high aptitude backgrounds. Maybe they've won a dozen hackathons. Maybe they use AI so well that every time they build something, it goes viral on X. Or maybe they're up and coming through programs like Founders Inc., South Park Commons, ODF, or HF0. Or just maybe they have that something we want to bet on. Since we've been running this podcast since 2019, we've interviewed the founders of Deal, Turing, Mercury, and hundreds of others at the pre-seed stage. And now we're looking for the next one. We find these founders, we interview them, and we track them over time. And our bet is a good portion of these guests will go on to build $1 billion companies of tomorrow. We won't be perfect, but every guest has passed our sniff test, has an interesting story to share, and is on a trajectory worth watching. This is Forward Thinking Founders. I'm your host, Matt Sherman. Let's get into it. All right, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Forward Thinking Founders, where we talk to founders about their companies, their visions for the future, and how the two collide. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to Will Preble, who's a co-founder and CEO of Covenant Labs. Welcome to the show. How's it going? You're muted. We're gonna leave that in though because it's a fun COVID joke.
Gotta love the muted mic. I am blessed to be here. Thanks for having me on.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. You're working on really fundamental stuff that I think could be very important for like the future of this new AI era, and I'm super excited to dive into it. I think to kick us off, what are you working on? Can you kind of like describe what you're up to at Covenant Labs?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Covenant Labs, we're building the infrastructure to be the best place to run open source models that are fully encrypted, fully yours, fully owned by you, so that you can use your AI and you can fully trust that it's completely yours, completely private, and completely dedicated to you and not a third party.
So who would be an example of someone that would want to use your technology, like a type of company, and maybe what would be their use case of why they want the encryption, why they want like the private, the option of what you're creating?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's already a big movement towards open source models, towards on-prem deployments. Companies are starting to understand the reality that if you put all of your core IP into a model that's sitting on someone else's servers in an unencrypted state, that's potentially a risky thing, right? Because AI, like we're relying on AI for really core and important pieces of our business, and as well as our individual lives. But that's another conversation. And so it's easiest to sell this to industries like fintech, healthcare, legal that already understand the importance of data privacy. But it's really relevant for anyone that has that's good at what they do and they have data from their industry that's important or meaningful. If you don't want that data to be put into a model or put out into the world in a way that could compromise your competitive moat, it's worth at least thinking about offloading some of your AI use cases to a private model.
So tell me a bit about how'd you get into this? This is like, I'm not going to say it's niche because it's not niche, but it's like it's a specific thing to be working on that is really relevant to the future. So how did you find yourself, caring about this specifically? How'd you get here?
Yeah, totally. I've always been kind of an advocate for individual sovereignty, privacy, digital privacy. Spent a little bit of time in the Web3 space as a participant, and I've also always been kind of at the edge of emerging technology with where my career's gone. I've got a data science degree. I worked in machine learning in 2017, 18, before it was cool, I'd like to say, but it was still cool back then. And so I had this intersection of I love emerging tech. I love building things that no one has built before or that were not possible to build before. And I have a really strong conviction that You know, the version of the future where we all kind of own more pieces of our digital infrastructure is just it's a better future for many reasons. And so for me personally, I was building models for companies like Nestle and doing a lot of work as a practitioner and kind of a high level consultant for several years. And so I was thinking about this problem for me and for my clients as far as how do I deploy better, pipelines of private models, encrypted models. And so it started as an internal experiment, something I was hacking on, and then I eventually brought in my co-founder now, Tyler, to hack on it with me because we were both interested in the same things. And one thing led to another with the breakthrough we had around this encryption protocol we're calling the model encryption protocol. And that's where we realized, we have something here. This is actually an important solution to a big problem, and we need to build a company around this.
So let's get specific. I'm gonna ask some super basic questions,
Go for it.
and we obviously I've already asked these questions like at press and like trying to understand the basics, but asking them again will be helpful for the audience and also helpful for me, right? So let's say I have let's say Arena, right? My platform Arena. I don't want I don't want that data to get in the wrong hands. I don't want anyone to actually see that data or know it's associated with Arena. So maybe it's not the best example, but we'll just like roll with it. How would I like walk me through the step by step without sharing secret sauce? Like how I'm able to interface with a llama or an open source AI, and what I can do knowing that everything's encrypted, but then what I'm able to like do with that information with your technology, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And so essentially you can, if right now our platform that's in a closed beta state is for developers. So it is a technical platform. We will work on layers of simpler, more consumer facing or
Not
business
it's
facing.
not built for normies like me.
Not yet, but it is becoming really easy to the point where you could vibe code it. So we have people in our Discord right now that we gave beta keys to that are less technical, but are building businesses primarily with vibe coding. So it's not so complex that a vibe coder couldn't use it,
Yep.
but it is a developer tool. So what you can do is you can spin up a model. So we don't charge per API call, or it's not like a monthly subscription. Unless you're an enterprise deploying on a dedicated GPU, which is a separate conversation for an enterprise client. But for you, if you're a developer, you come onto our platform, you can spin up a model, and you're deploying on your own hardware, so it's an hourly cost. So if you use, say, one of the new Gwen thinking models, the new Gwen series I really like. It's a really good series of open source models. There's a 4 billion parameter model, which if you guys don't know what the parameter sizes are, that's a really small model. We're finding that this thinking model is able to do a lot of things that models 10 or 100 times its size typically were known for being able to do. So it's a really good small model. So you could spin up that model for probably 40 cents an hour, and then you could go and use it you could use it obviously as a chat application to work on your business, but you can also build agentic tools and workflows, and that's kind of some of the tooling we're building right now for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish within Arena. So maybe you want to run an automated workflow to analyze data from all the updates you're getting from all the companies every week, and maybe scraping some data from socials and social listening. You want a full profile of all your companies in Arena. We could go spin up that model, and we could help you set up a workflow, or you could do it yourself, where every week it's analyzing and creating this Arena ranking in an automated fashion. And maybe you have some automations already. I don't know the secret sauce of Arena, but that would be one use case. And then you'd have that model where you have the private key, so only you can access that data. So even if we as Covenant wanted to say, hey, I want to know how Matt's doing the rankings for Arena so I can hack my way in there or something, well, I can't, because even if we wanted to take your data, it's encrypted, so we wouldn't be able to do anything with it.
Yeah, it's honestly very fun. I have vibe coded. I mean, all of Arena. Like I'm not technical, But with ChatGPT, I've been able to write some insane Airtable scripts. That is, and
That's cool.
yesterday, so every day, every Monday at 5 o'clock PT, the leaderboard resets, and I was at a founder house that I was putting together, and we were just like looking at the leaderboard as it was resetting, and it felt like we were in the Matrix. I wasn't doing anything; it was just, it was pretty fun.
That's cool.
So let's go a little higher level here. Like, you, what is exciting to you outside of like what you're working on? Obviously, I'm sure you're very excited about Covenant Labs, but like, what in the broader AI industry? What are things that are happening that are piquing your interest? Maybe developments, mainstream, they could be emerging, but like, what's interesting to you here?
Yeah. I'm really interested in what's happening in decentralized AI right now. I think personally, I think that the path to AGI or this general like human level intelligence or superhuman intelligence is not it's not necessarily one big thinking model, although it may be that we might get that level of intelligence in one model, but it's more likely kind of swarms of models acting as kind of a brain, and so there's a lot of cool projects on the decentralized AI side of things that are working on like intelligent swarms and some really cool kind of edge research there that I think personally is really interesting. The average person may not, but I think this idea of distributed intelligence, which obviously fits with the themes of what we're building at Covenant, is really cool and really interesting because it kind of it gives the power to kind of be at the edge of AI to a larger number of people because obviously only a handful of people in the world can spend $100 billion on training GPT-6 or what have you. But with some of the stuff that's happening on the edge of this kind of decentralized or distributed AI space, we're democratizing access to some of these edge tools and research vectors. So
Explain like what swarm, what you mean by swarm. Like, I know the concept of the swarm intelligence, which is this is from like 10 years ago, not
yeah.
nothing to do with AI. But I'm guessing it's a similar concept. Can you just explain what you mean, like multiple models leading to like a more intelligent output, or help me understand?
Yeah, and I will explain it in terms of something we're actually building, and I will preface by saying this is a very experimental thing. This is not in our current version of our platform, but we have a number of agentic tools that are in our pipeline, and so one of the things that like we're really excited about is fine tuning, not just fine tuning a model, but you give an agent a use case like, hey, I want to be able to like run a Twitter account, or I want to be able to do some kind of complex task with multiple steps and things. Um, we're essentially building a system internally, experimentally, where you can give the system that task, and it's going to spin up. It might spin up 50 models of various sizes. It could be a lot of them will be small models typically that are very cheap and inefficient to run, and the pipeline actually tunes itself. So instead of you running a fine tuning job on one model, you have a system of models that are tuning themselves and spinning up new models to fill in gaps. And so that's kind of the direction of what like a swarm would be. It's like a bunch of models that are collaborating on a task, and even with the ability to like add models or spin up more instances of themselves.
That makes sense. Where do you land on the like? In my perception of AI, or like one framing of this is there is the mindset that it's going to take over the world and there's going to be cyborgs and it's going to kill everyone and all that stuff. Which I think that's going away a little bit. I think some of that exists, but I think the fear is going down a little bit. When you look at like kind of two companies, OpenAI, and you look at Anthropic, and this is kind of more like a general question. I'm curious for your opinion on
Yeah.
it. Like, it looks like Anthropic is like very, very, very focused on like safety. They have it very embedded into the company. And I feel like the culture and the brand of Anthropic and Quad is like it's like a safer AI, whatever that means. And
Yeah.
OpenAI, I feel like is focused on winning because and not just winning. I think they're focused on safety too. But I see their brand is like they just want to be the winner. They just want to be the biggest and the best and at any cost. Not any cost, but it's unclear what that cost is,
Yeah.
right? What's your like? Does Covenant do you fall in either of those camps, or like what's your opinion on like building the biggest thing regardless of cost versus like building the biggest thing but thinking about cost a lot? What do you think is the most optimal strategy? Obviously, it's kind of a loaded question, but you're very deep in this industry, so I'd just love your take on it.
Yeah, I might have a bit of a slightly contrarian answer to it. I think, well, I mean, it is interesting too to see that multiple of the founders of OpenAI have spun off, and one of them is focused on like safety now. So Ilya, which is a whole rabbit hole of a conversation, but yeah, your assessment seems correct of how those companies are running. But I think all the big labs are somewhat focused on safety. It's not that they're not, but to your point, it's kind of like, well, what is that balance, right? Or are we more focused on safety, or are we going to win and then we'll be safe later, kind of a thing? I think that there's one part of the conversation which is like, could we build this big super intelligent model that's like is unsafe for some reason, or turns against humanity or something like that, Terminator kind of vibes. But then there's also I think the bigger risk is less that. It is a risk, it's a real risk, but the bigger risk is kind of creating an environment where we're lending ourselves towards more of like a totalitarian state, where essentially there's no privacy, there's no there's no real capitalism, because no company has a moat, because every company is essentially building on top of someone else, right? Where there's really no ownership anymore, and we get to a point where there's too much power concentrated in too few hands, and something goes wrong there, because historically, it's not to say that anyone in the AI space is evil or anything. I think most of them have really good intentions and are great people, but it's just kind of like a fragile system at a certain point if we're setting things up that way, a house of cards, if you will. And so the aspect of safety that we're focused on, because we're not training foundation models, at least not at this point or anytime soon. We'll be tuning our own model series, but we're not doing what OpenAI is doing at the biggest levels of model training. But we think that safety is going to come with more ownership and responsibility. If you're managing your models and you're responsible for your open source infrastructure and you take it seriously, you're not just pawning off that responsibility on someone else. You have more skin in the game, and you have to care more about safety. And not that everyone should be the expert. Hopefully you work with a company like us or someone else who can be the experts you refer to. We need every single person to be an AI safety expert, but it becomes a less fragile system, I think, if people actually have control over the models they're using and the data that's going in and out of it, because there's just less temptation or less risk of hacking, less fragility of something that could go really wrong, where say like, we're all building on OpenAI and then China compromises OpenAI, right? Well, they could take down our entire economy essentially, right? Like that's a real risk, and that's not something you can abstract away by just hoping everyone's good. It's like that's a geopolitical risk, right? And so that's kind of where I think we're focused on in the safety conversation. Not to say the other aspects of it aren't important too, but
That makes sense. That brings up another question. Is a simple way to think about Covenant, like, you just allow any company essentially to spin up their own model, almost like a mini OpenAI, or like a mini Claude, where it's all open source. They can kind of like control. Well, I'll stop there. Is that a fair analogy, where it's like everyone has their own little model they can do what they want with?
exactly, and not just their own model, but in the near future, you'll be able to fine tune it on your data or run our fine tuning pipelines continuously. So it's like you have your own model plus tune to be really efficient for whatever it is that you're doing.
So what is going into some more basic questions? When you say tuning, like I as a consumer of OpenAI, or a consumer of Claude or ChatGPT and Claude, like I don't think I tune. Maybe I do subconsciously, but I think it's like they're the ones doing the tuning. Because I say that because I don't know what tuning is. So like, let's say I you get to the point soon or whenever it is where I can have my own model, powered by Covenant, and I'm able to tune it. What does that even what does that mean, and what does that look like to do?
That is a really good question, and that's probably a foundational term I should have defined. So tuning would be, so training is like if you're doing the whole thing. Like if I'm
Yep.
training GPT-5 or whatever it is, I'm I'm doing the end-to-end process of I have nothing to I have a super intelligent large language model. Tuning is if I take that model and you have to have the model weights, which is why we can do it with open source models. We couldn't do it with like GPT's models and still encrypt them because we don't have their weights. Tuning is taking an existing model and just doing like a little bit of post training. And so it's like if you have an NBA player that's like already really good at basketball, but like their jump shot isn't perfect, and then you go train them on their jump shot for like a week, and now they like fixed something, and now it's perfect, right? That would be tuning. It's just little tweaks, but specific to something that's really relevant to what you're doing, so that it's just tuned for your use case.
So that's interesting. So I use Airtable AI. It's like I'm sure they use one of these models, and I'll use an example. Like, so I have a thing where the founders give weekly updates, and I do read all of them, but it's hard. I'm a human. I have bias. Like, there's people that I know, people that I don't know, right? So I kind of have actually an AI analyze all the updates, score them, and then I review the scores to see if that feels right for each one. And if I see a score that feels off, maybe I can identify where it's off, go into the actual, not code, but like my commandment for the AI, say actually change these things because like this doesn't make quite sense. This may make more sense. Is that the no code version of tuning, or is that doing something different?
Yeah, you're not tuning. It's similar in the sense it's kind of like the dirty version of it because you're just kind of training a thread. You're giving it context. What
Yeah.
you're doing is you're tuning. You could call it tuning, but it's not technically tuning. You're just giving it the right context and prompting. So prompting and context to make the best decisions or give you the best outcomes. So that's an important thing too, and that's an accessible thing for anyone to do. But tuning is a slightly more technical. You're actually running a tuning pipeline where we're adding data to the model and training it on specific things.
Changing the tune a little bit, you're like pretty good at explaining. Like, I feel like I meet a lot of founders who are hypey, or they're technical, but they let their enthusiasm maybe get in the way of what they're saying. And one thing that I've always found interesting about you is that you're very calm, you're even tempered, and you explain what you're doing in a very calm way. And you resemble some sort of like expertise around it. Like, you come off like an expert, and I don't know if you would call yourself an expert, but you come off like an expert. Do you feel like you are an expert at this, or is it how have you learned this stuff when it changes all the time? How do you communicate with such confidence and like stability around it in such an ever-changing environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, it was partially I just turned 30, so I'm old now, I guess by my
I
standards.
feel you. I'm
But
right there with you.
a lot of my 20s, my early entrepreneurial career, it was a lot of I had to learn really fast when I left corporate, where you're just in a technical environment or around people who know all the jargon, and you go out and you have to fend for yourself. I realized really early on, like, if I want to eat, I either have to work for someone else or I have to figure out how to communicate really effectively, because I'm doing really complex things. And so if people don't understand what I'm doing, then they don't want to give me money, they don't want to work with me. And so it was kind of a trial by fire of like, I knew it was a skill set I needed to pick up, and so I kind of consciously or maybe subconsciously chose a path that forced me to build that skill set. And I think it's also kind of in line with the ethos of where we're at with Covenant, is that we're like my co-founder Tyler, I would consider myself an expert, but I'm not. Like, my co-founder is like 10 levels above me in specific like programming expertise. So I have a lot of general expertise, and I understand that I have great conceptual expertise, but I can't write the same algorithms that my co-founder can write. And so there's different kinds of expertise, but I think it is really important for people to understand some of these concepts because AI is just becoming such a big aspect of our lives, especially if you're a founder and you're building companies of any kind of company at this point. And so, yeah, it's just been an area of focus because one, it was a necessity for me to succeed as a founder, and two, I think I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about these concepts, and if you're just really boring and technical for the sake of sounding smart, you might get some social feedback from being in some of these like networks or labs or what have you, but if you go to the marketplace, if you go to the average person, there's no benefit to doing that. And I guess the last part of this answer would be both Tyler and I have taken kind of a non-traditional path. Like we're from Minnesota. I'm in Arizona right now, but we kind of cut our teeth in Minnesota. We weren't in a big market. We went to San Francisco. It's not like we didn't spend time in these places, but we didn't go to Harvard. We weren't in like a lot of these circles. And so now we're breaking in from the outside. And I think in a lot of ways there's different skills that we have to pick up and networks we have to build, but it also gives us an advantage because, and me specifically as kind of the talker, because we just had a different set of ideas, or if you think of an AI model, like our inputs are different. And so we have a more unique and tuned output versus maybe if you just were sitting in San Francisco for 10 years, you'd have different skills that maybe I don't have, and if I had to pick up separately, but you're like the way that I've learned to communicate has been from being kind of outside of those bubbles, I think.
What is one or more than one thing that you've learned as you've been in the process of breaking into Silicon Valley and breaking into the industry? What's like something that's been surprising or just an interesting observation from that process?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that the act of building a business and a great product and the act of raising funds and getting support for your startup from an established network of gatekeepers, and I don't say that in a negative way, just the way it works, those are two very different things.
They're so different. It's
Yeah.
so crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest thing. It's very apparent once you get into fundraising.
Yeah, I was just in Arena, someone emailed me and they asked me after the last leaderboard update or a week ago. He's like, hey, like, I was surprised I didn't go higher on the leaderboard. Like, why am I not higher? I thought you'd like my pitch deck. So I look at his stuff and I see he hasn't done an update yet. He hasn't come to any event, and so I tell him, like, you haven't, which is fine, like, maybe he doesn't know, or I don't know, but I told him, hey, it looks like you aren't, like, engaging in the thing, and growing your contacts, and he's like, I don't have time to do that when I'm busy selling and getting customers, and I completely agree, like, it's like, if you're very focused on building and getting customers, too busy where you're not able to, like, take a lot of time to, like, learn this in some ways very stupid game of social capital and fundraising in Silicon Valley, then that's great to know early on, because like it is completely separate from building a business. But for those that want to build something big quickly, because you can like build something big over time, bootstrap. But for those that do want to raise money and go out on the path, it is worth taking the 3 to 12 months or much longer to like go kind of the slow way and learn how it works, because it's like very, like you said, very different from getting customers, building product. It's almost the opposite in some ways.
In many ways, yeah. Yeah, and I think that with my co-founder and it works well because I actually enjoy this. I see like learning these networks and systems is just like another system to learn. It's another cool like game to hack and play. Whereas my co-founder is like, I can't, like every conversation is like a very technical conversation and very specific to the business, and not a knock on him at all, but he wants to sit in the code, and so we work well together. I can't imagine if I'm sure there's some people that are like very hardcore talented programmers that just like get very frustrated with this game. So sometimes maybe your founder choice is important, or your co-founder.
Totally. Um, what is the next like year or two or three, or like what does the next phase of Covenant look like? Like what are you focused on, and what do you see coming for you?
Yeah, so we're focused on right now. We're focused on two things. One is fundraising, and then the other is kind of validating our product, finding product market fit with our early batch of early customers, pilots, beta users, etc. The biggest constraint right now for us is compute, which is hence why we're fundraising, because that basically cuts our margins by 50% and improves our scalability by a lot once we have some resources to pump into dedicated compute. But yeah, we're working on the milestone of, so we have our beta platform out, hoping to release, and we are going to release our full platform with our agentic pipeline tuning as well, before the end of the year, so in Q4. So that's a milestone on the horizon, and then over the next couple years, really want to scale somewhat fast in the sense that we're building things that have a window of time for them to be relevant. Not they're always going to be relevant, but we're kind of at the cutting edge of a space that we believe at the right moment at the right time, and so it's kind of getting our foot in the door in a few key industries, with a few really big stakeholder cornerstone customers, and then scaling it up more broadly as we're able to bring on be more mass available to developers and such.
Cool. If someone wanted to learn more about Covenant, learn more about you, connect online, website, whatever it may be, how can someone learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, you can go to covenantlabs.ai. That's our website. We have some research up there, our encryption protocol, in a somewhat accessible way, I would say. So you don't have to be super technical to read it, and try to be intentional with the language there. You can also go follow us at Covenant Labs AI on X, and follow there for updates, and then you can follow my socials, where there's going to be a lot more updates and content starting to come out here. And I'm William's my name, but there's an X, so it's Will XM, and that's pretty much every platform, but Twitter is good, or Instagram.
I have one last question, which may lead to two, but you're on Twitter. What why are you on Twitter? And like, do you get value out of it? And if you do, what kind of value do you get out of like that platform? I always ask because it's like such a interesting platform, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on it. And I get a lot of value out of it. But I'm curious. You just said your Twitter, and your company's on Twitter, so I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I've actually just been really learning. I've been on Twitter for a long time, use it as a source of information, and so I think it's like one of the highest signal places. Well, I'll say if you're intentional about how you curate your sources of information, it can be one of the highest signal places of information. Now that does depend on, there is kind of some user intent there, where you have to follow the right people, you have to get into the right groups and threads and such of conversations. So, but it's not that hard to figure out. If you just want to be an AI or something, for example, it's a really easy place to go find AI people and get into the conversation. So I think Twitter's probably outside of group chats and off social stuff, like Twitter is probably the edge of information. Like all the other platforms, I created more for Instagram in the past and have some following there, so it's different going to Twitter. Twitter is like very fast, very kind of like emergent, whereas the other platforms will kind of take information from Twitter and turn it into like trendy viral type content. So it's really cool because it feels really living, and the downside is you kind of get what you put into it. So and that's something I'm learning now, being more of a creator on Twitter than just a user. Is you have to be intentional with it. You got to be replying. You got to be intentional about where you're putting yourself to if you want to grow and build your network there.
100%. Yeah, I'm a big advocate. If you're trying to break into Silicon Valley or just like raise money or just better understand tech, get on Twitter. You don't even have to post. You can just like observe and follow the right people and just observe 10 minutes a day. It's crazy. Well, Will, thank you for coming on. You're a wealth of knowledge, super interesting, like niche, or I don't know if you call it a niche, but like kind of specific
Yeah.
area of AI that you're working on. And I'm looking forward to watching it, watching Covenant grow as the industry grows and as the need for what you're building grows as well. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.